Welcome to our new Osceola studio, and welcome to the 2022 preseason position preview. Today we move on to the defense, and we'll start with the tackles and ends. I'm Bob Ferranti. I'm joined by Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts.
Great to be here. Good to have Mark Salva is going to join us today. Mark, welcome.
Glad to be here as always, guys.
Mark came to Florida State and originally recruited as a defensive lineman. And Mark, talk about your days at a little bit at Winter Park High School. You and Paul McGowan were teammates down there, recruited in that '84 class.
Wow, that was a while ago, Jerry. But yeah, we Paul and I came in as defensive players. Obviously, Paul stayed on defense. I spent my first probably month at FSU as a true freshman as a defensive tackle, defensive nose guard, and so going on the board drills against Jamie Dukes and John Ionata early was an eye opener for me, to say the least. But we had some injuries on the offensive line, and since I was a two-way player in high school and had a little bit of skill, they decided on the open week after the first game to switch me over to offense, and then I went on offense. But I spent some time with Chuck Amato and on the defensive side of the ball, and alongside greats like Gerald Nichols and Stanley Scott and guys like that, Isaac Williams. So had some little bit of experience on that side of the ball.
Mark, talk about in your playing career and coaching career. We're going to talk about defensive line, but as a offensive lineman and as a center particularly, you study defensive lines all the time, right?
Oh, absolutely. Part of the thing about being an offensive line coach or just a coordinator when you're trying to scheme a defense, you obviously study your opponent as detailed as you can, almost as much detail as you would your own position, to understand what you can do to affect them. So you study scheme, you study technique, you study defensive structure, to understand where the weaknesses are. And so, we talked about this during our happy hour a couple of weeks ago, right? Like when people are hiring all these analysts, they're hiring an offensive line coach or an offensive coach to work with the defense, right? And I use the term like to red team it, right? It's a military term, meaning you want to play the part of the opponent. How would you attack this, or where do you see weaknesses? And so, you got to have obviously just as much, if not more, understanding of what you're looking at as an offensive coach is looking at the defense, to understand where you're going to attack and why you're going to attack.
Well, great defenses are usually very good up the middle. It's kind of a baseball axiom. I think it's a football truism to some extent too. We think the strength of this defensive line is going to be on the interior, a lot of depth at end and tackle, but maybe let's start with tackle. And I think a really big decision was Robert Cooper and Fabian Lovett deciding they are going to come back, continue their career at Florida State, and not make an early jump to the NFL. What can these two defensive tackles bring? Experience, production, push that pocket up a little bit in terms of putting some pressure on that quarterback.
Yeah, that was probably right. That was good news. Experience, older players, maturity, leadership. And the core of your football team is your lines on both sides of the ball, and if you have experience and maturity and leadership at those positions, you're ahead of the game, and that's really important. They set the tone. So specifically what Robert Cooper brings to me, it's interesting. When he was a true freshman, you saw the potential. You saw a big body who played, ate a lot of space, was hard to move. And as he got older, and as you watched him play more and more, you saw him get better incrementally. So that kind of excites me. You also saw his body start to mature. So, that tells me that he understands what he needs to do in order to be an elite player, and under the guidance of Odell. So I'm excited to see if Robert can make that next step to being an elite player. He's a good player, like we said earlier, a space eater, hard to move. Can he be an elite player making plays sideline to sideline and affecting the pocket in the passing game, stuffing the run? Stuffing the run is the easy part for him. It's other stuff that will take him to the next level. Fabian Levitt coming back, also great news. He's the more athletic of the two. He's a slippery kind of player, but he's also, pretty physical. That three technique you hope you have, that Warren Sapp type of player. Guy that can get up the field, can also take on double teams. Hopefully, we get long-term production from him too. Just overall at that position, looks like we have a little depth there too. With Malcolm Ray, Josh Farmer, Jarrett Simpson, those guys. So looking at that interior defensive line, I think we got a lot of really good players. But the question for me that needs to be answered is, are they elite? And when Florida State defense is at its best, it's when that position has elite players. And you can start going down the list of who those players were through the years. But when you look at our best teams, that's where we were good. And it reminds me of, when Coach Bowden, we would do this thing called Hideaway. Jerry, you remember Hideaway, right? And we're in this time of year in the preseason, we'd have all the coaches together, and Coach Bowden would go through his notes. But one thing that really stuck out with me was he had a note that he would talk to us about that would be, he would say, the team with the best defensive tackles wins. And there's a reason for that, because you're affecting so much of the ball game. If you can't move those two guys, or if those two guys affect the game, you could throw out a lot of offense if you can't block those two guys. And when we're at our best, those are the guys. So the question for me is, are they elite?
I heard your dogs in the background. I hope we got some dogs up front.
Exactly. Some dogs that can hunt. Sorry about that.
That's good.
Well, and Florida State may have some other guys who have developed through the years. I think coaches have had patience with, say, a Malcolm Ray, a Jarrett Jackson. We've seen Malcolm maybe develop over time. He got a start, I believe, up at North Carolina, where Fabian honestly said Malcolm's had a great week of practice. Malcolm deserves and has earned that start. These are younger guys who have gotten the reps. The opportunities are there. Can they take that next step here in 2022?
I'm anxious to see. We need them to, obviously. Jarrett Jackson, Malcolm Ray, those are the two guys to me that, what you want to see when you substitute in, you don't want to see any drop off, right? So what I hope it is that Fabian and Cooper have raised their level enough, and those guys have raised their level enough that they're catching up to push them. That's where you have that competition. That's when you're going to have great things happen. Again, when we need, and any great team needs to have depth along the defensive front and have frequent substitutions to keep guys fresh, to tolerate injuries. I mean, it's just so important. We don't need to have a situation where we get a guy hurt and we got to play somebody who can't play, and there's a huge drop off. When we get to that point, we'll start stacking up wins, stacking up, small victories in the course of the game, and in turn, the games overall.
Mark, as I watch Malcolm Ray, I see he's a little bit different guy than Cooper. I mean, to me, he's a little slipperier. He's a guy I think that can create a little bit of pressure in the front. So
I agree.
And that's and then of course Jarrett Jackson. We've seen enough to have hope there that he might be a significant player as well. So it looks to me like we've got two deep, and then the question is, who do we like from practice in the spring that we think might be able to step up?
Yeah, questions to be answered as camp starts in late July and goes into August. We'll take a break here for 30 seconds. We'll move on to defensive ends.
Alumni Hall, where you'll find officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family, including brands like Nike and Champion, plus great gifts for your favorite Seminole and home decor too. Miss some of the old Seminole throwback logos? Check out our College Vault collection. Shop online at alumnihall.com and let our great customer sales team ship to you within days, or pick up in store in Tallahassee. You'll find us in the Miracle Plaza Shopping Center on Thomasville Road. Students and military get 10% off in store, and Osceola subscribers get 20% off in store and online with their digital membership cards. Alumni Hall.
Let's move on to defensive end, and the guy who's made the splash in the offseason was Jared Verse, making the jump from FCS Albany to Florida State in a Power 5 program. I think we have to set some realistic expectations for someone who is making this big of a leap. Again, he started out his career in college as a tight end, made that shift to defensive end, and incredibly productive. But I'm very curious, Mark, let's set what is a realistic bar for a guy like Jared Verse. He's not going to be a Jermaine Johnson. He's not going to be a Keir Thomas. He's got to be his own man, his own Jared Verse. How does he go about approaching that, and what is this jump like from FCS to Power 5?
Bob, that's a great point, because I went back and looked at the Notre Dame game last year, first half anyways, and Jermaine Johnson came in a ready-made player. He was a grown man coming here. He impacted that game right off the bat. Jared Verse, coming from a lower division, coming up to big boy football, there's just everything's different. How you practice, how you prepare, the competition you see every day in practice, the expectations obviously are very big. For Jared, he's going to have to, number one, learn how to practice. He's going to have to learn how to compete. He's going to have to go up against better competition every day in practice. And how he handles that. How does he, I don't know anything about his mental mindset. I don't know anything about his maturity. What I do know is that he's an athletic guy. He's got some physical tools. But now the question is, how does he handle it mentally? Is he a mature guy? Where are his areas to grow in terms of technique and in terms of how he plays? Can he play hard every snap? Expectations for an FSU defensive end is to be one of those hunting dogs that just is relentless going after the quarterback and relentless chasing the football, right? The backside defensive end making plays on the other sideline. That's the expectation for an FSU defensive end. And does he have that kind of desire? So that's the big questions we have for him. So to expect him to come in and be Jermaine Johnson right off the bat, that's really unrealistic. He's still got a lot to prove to himself, probably, to be the player he wants to be. Can he get there? All indications are he has the tools. So we'll see.
Let me add to what Mark said. I think one of the things that our coaches saw in him, the way they found him was we were getting ready to play Syracuse, and yep. Syracuse had played against the school he was at, and one of the analysts saw this kid over and over again making plays, and which included chasing the ball from way back. And that's how we came on to him. Now, one of the good things I'd like to say to Mark's point, so when Jermaine Johnson came in, he was a grown man. He's older than Jared Verse is coming in, and so you got a ready-made football player. I think Jared's probably 2 years younger, right? And to set expectations, I think is appropriate. Now, what was really beneficial to him and to Florida State is he did get to go through spring, and we were able to observe his practice habits and his demeanor. He looks very comfortable out there. I mean, he stands out from his segment group that he does have the mental mindset, at least for spring practice, right? Now, when you get into the season and you roll into, to that Superdome, the second game, and you're going against an SEC offensive lineman, how are you going to weather the storm, and how are you going to weather it throughout the season? And those are the things, Mark, I think you're really focusing on, that nobody knows that until you get put into the fire.
That's right. That's right. I mean, he's a third-year player. He's a third-year player, and you just get the sense out there, especially when he first signed, that we're like, oh, we lost Jermaine, but we got Jared. And I think that's folly, So let's just pump the brakes on that part of it. Does he have the potential to do it? Absolutely, he does. And let's just let it play out and see what happens.
Okay, so the fans listening to this, yes, we are trying to set some expectations here, but this kid is going to be a good player. And how
I'm excited about him, no question.
How fast that happens, I think, is going to be very important to this football team, because we had great pass pressure last year, and that may be the thing that we're not quite as good at this year. And so a kid like a Jared Verse becomes really important to this defensive structure.
I think continuing our theme of patience and development, look at a couple of the other ends. A guy like Dennis Briggs, who's played tackle a lot, he missed part of that COVID season. Last year, he had the chop block against Louisville, missed a lot of time. He was having a really good start to September of 2021. And Derek McClendon, a fourth-year guy who, by his own admission, knows he has taken time to make progress in this in football, in the system, new coaching staff, but he's been very committed to it, very confident, composed guy. Again, we think there's depth there. We don't know, we haven't seen enough of it on Saturdays, but how do you feel about some of these backups who can step up into their roles too?
I'm genuinely excited about Dennis Briggs. Again, I went back and watched that Notre Dame game and where he was playing interior line, and I really like the way he moves, the way he attacks the line of scrimmage. I think he will be the defensive end stalwart, the consistency, hopefully, at the position. If he can stay healthy, I'm really fired up about Dennis Briggs out there, setting that edge. And I think he's going to do a fine job of that. And as long as he stays healthy, and I'm, praying that he does. With McClendon, I got to tell you, for me, it's wait and see on McClendon. He was a young player and he was thrown into the fire early and he probably wasn't ready a lot of the times. And so I'm going off of what I saw the last 2 years with him, and great leaps are made that third year. You've been in the system, so I'm hoping that, and everything I've heard and a little bit I've seen, he's made some tremendous leaps, in terms of his ability to play and be productive. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got some tools, and so we'll see how he can do. So he and Verse are those two guys that are the unknowns in terms of guys that we know are going to be on the field. And then I'm a little bit intrigued about Leonard Warner moving over there. Again, an older player, a more experienced player, that he's been through the ringer, he's been through that crucible, right? Can he offer some stability and some maturity and some, now he's been in this Norvell culture for a while. Can he, offer some leadership in that position? Maybe not a starter, but maybe a guy who can spell, maybe a guy who can go in there, and who knows, he may surprise us. I'm looking for a surprise in this group, and he may be one of those guys.
So those first two guys, Briggs and Warner, both have had to deal with injury in their career, and they're coming off of some rehabs. And I was, Mark, I was encouraged by Warner in the spring. He is a leader, and he is a guy, I think, that this is his sayonara year, right? This is it. So we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, I just think overall, we're starting to talk about players that have been in this system 2 and 3 years that are getting older. We've talked about it on the offensive line. We're talking about it now on the defensive line. And, I get the feeling that we're starting to see some momentum, because the guys that are still here that have weathered the storm that it's been the last 2 years are going to be so much better for it and going to be able to offer something. Now, it's something that you kind of got to go through when you're building a program. And these are the guys that hopefully in 5, 6, 7 years, we're going to look back and say, these guys stuck it out. These are the guys that helped elevate this football team and, had helped rebuild what is Florida State football.
We'll wrap up our look at Florida State's defensive front after this 30-second break.
Hey Seminole fans, tickets to Florida State football games are now on sale. Right now, you can pick up single game tickets, 3-game packs, and season tickets for the 2022 season. Home games include Florida, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Boston College, Louisiana, and Duquesne. Have fun this football season with your friends and family, all the while knowing your ticket purchase is funding FSU's success. Call your ticket rep today at 850-644-1830 or visit Seminoles.com. That's Seminoles.com.
We're back, and we're going to look at some of the younger players on the defensive front. So, Mark, to you first. Let's talk about one tackle or one end, a young guy, first-year, second-year guy that you think can really make that step and be impactful.
Yeah. I'm always looking to see if we can get somebody in that can really be impactful, that maybe surprises us. And from what I can tell and from what I've heard and seen is maybe Daniel Lyons can be a guy, early enrollee, spent time in the spring, really athletic, kid from Homestead. I'm anxious to see, hopefully, that he can bring some of that. From everything I've seen and read, he's a pretty instinctual player. You guys have seen him more on the practice field than I have. I hopefully he can be a guy who can step up and offer something for us this year.
Yeah, I would agree with Mark's assessment in there with Daniel Lyons. There's other guys. There are two: Joshua Farmer, Bishop Thomas, Sean Bray Jackson. I mean, we are deep, but young. My guy, the guy that I've liked since I saw him in high school, is Patrick Payton. And I think Patrick is a very good football player out of Miami who, of course, I always pick a Miami guy, right? But he's a little twitchy. And when you need a pass rush and a guy who maybe can help you on the edge, I think he's big and strong enough to defend the run, but he can also get at the passer.
Yeah, I'll go Josh Farmer just because you guys took some good picks there. Josh Farmer's added a lot of weight, hard worker. You can tell he's accepting coaching from Odell Haggins. That's not easy being this young, but he's learning and listening. Like to see that a lot. What's a good look from us at Florida State's defensive front going into the 2022 camp? Well, thanks to Mark Salva for joining us for our look at Florida State's defensive front going into camp. Please like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube for analysis from guys like Mark Salva, Charlie Ward, Kez McCorvey, Leroy Smith, Kirk Carruthers, all of our guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.